Celeste is a very important game to me. I have important memories from every level in this game. I've played it so much I couldn't tell you how many times I've beaten it. But I think the most important and most life changing moment in this game was the final chapter of the game. Chapter 9, also known as Farewell. Looking back on it, this chapter taught me a lot about myself. It kind of solidified who I was. Not really changing me, but I came to the realization of who I was, or in a way, gained a better understanding of myself. Alright, I think the best place to start is obviously the start of the chapter. For the most part, I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I already knew this must be the hardest chapter in the game because it was the last one, but I didn't exactly know how much harder. All I knew was that I was going to be in for a challenge. But despite that, I went into the chapter full force, thinking, I got this. I've beaten all the hardest challenges in the game prior, so I can beat this. The chapter starts off on a beautiful landscape, previously seen at the end of the Chapter 7 C-side. Quick side note, each chapter has an optional B-side and C-side, which are remixed versions of the level, making them harder and with a crystal heart at the end of each one. Although the chapter starts very beautifully, it quickly turns grim, with one of the important side characters, Granny, has been shown to have passed away. Already I made the parallel to the fact that the chapter was called Farewell, and was meant to symbolize saying goodbye to someone important, which in retrospect makes me understand why this chapter was so difficult. There then is some dialogue of the main character you play as, Madeline, and how she felt about the situation, saying that she didn't even go to the funeral because she didn't know how to handle the death of a close friend. I could relate with Madeline at this moment because I've also lost people in my life. It's hard to come to terms with, and even harder if you're alone. At this moment, another reoccurring character from the tutorial shows up. It's a bird. But in this case, it is important to the story, because the bird helped Madeline in some of the chapters, similar to what Granny did. So Madeline makes an assumption that they must be related in some way. She thinks this because of what happened to her on the mountain. Its strange powers had manifested a part of Madeline into their own sentient being, who you might have noticed is this little fella right here. And for the sake of ease, we are dubbing this character Badeline. Not necessarily because she's bad, but it's just easier than saying part of Madeline every time. Anyways, Madeline thinks that the bird in this situation must be part of Granny, just like Badeline is part of her. For a moment, too, I almost thought the same thing, but it doesn't entirely make sense. And as Badeline points out, Madeline is just in denial, and it's just a normal bird. But it would make sense, since Madeline is losing someone they care about. At this point, Madeline doesn't care and decides to chase the bird anyways, most likely in a state of stubborn denial, thinking that if she catches it, she might be able to see Granny one last time. And she does chase it, higher and higher and higher, until she reaches what looks like space, and this is where the chapter really starts. Already, I could feel the tension in the air in this level. The music that was playing was called Fear of the Unknown. It's hard to explain exactly what I was feeling in this moment, but anytime I listen to the song now, it gives me the same feeling of that tension and fear, but also, weirdly enough, little determination. The first few screens of the level are fairly normal, adding new mechanics never seen in previous chapters. They were made well enough, though, to where I feel like I learned them pretty quickly. And although I was dying here and there, I was enjoying myself in every room. But somewhere in the back of my mind, though, it didn't feel the same as previous chapters. Obviously, I know what it is now, but at the time, I just felt off. Interestingly enough, there were some mechanics in this level that were used in previous levels, which was unusual. But also the new mechanics were more of a remix of previous mechanics. It was a weird mishmash of things I knew combined with things that I didn't know. But the new features in the level acted similar to previous ones, just with a slight twist on them. It's like the level felt completely foreign, but also familiar in a strange way. After a little while, the rooms did start becoming more difficult, as I was dying more often, but it was bearable, and I never really got frustrated this early on. And every time I died, I would just think to myself, Dang, I can make it further. I got this far, so next time, I'll just go a little further. Eventually, I made it to this one room that was almost like a giant maze. It was filled with electricity and locks blocking the exit. Thinking about it now, this maze-like area was very clearly a tutorial that taught a new mechanic, but without directly saying so. This area taught me how to disable electricity by breaking the electric box, and also in each of these mini rooms where you would collect keys, they taught me how to use the new and most prevalent mechanic of this level, the jellyfish. I like how you can throw it and it could hit buttons and other interactables, or how you could dash into it and it would carry your momentum with it, or how it could disappear after hitting certain areas, and so many other things. It was a very eye-opening experience, and after unlocking all the gates and unlocking the next area, it felt like a huge accomplishment. The music of this area lightened up the mood and really made me feel determined, but still a bit hesitant. And at this point, I thought, this is the final stretch. I'm almost there. And flying through each room felt like a mini achievement. Every time I made it through a room, I felt like a mini genius or skilled master in the art of platforming. Obviously, I'm not the best, but in the moment, I felt very proud of myself. Eventually, after going through room after room, I checked the binoculars in one room, which binoculars allow you to view an entire room so you can get the layout and understand what you might have to do. And at the end of the room, there it was, Crystal Heart, which signifies the end of a level. And so, I went through this room with confidence, knowing I was about to finish the chapter. After a few deaths, I eventually made it through, and of course, celebrated a little at the end before picking up the Crystal Heart. But then after picking up the Crystal Heart, things were immediately off. The name of it was Empty Space. Strange, but many of the Crystal Hearts before had interesting names. Then all of a sudden, it's like a slap in the face. The bird flies across the screen, and I remembered at that moment the whole goal of the level wasn't to reach the end. It was to catch the bird and see Granny again. Crystal Heart shatters, and with it the level starts being corrupted as I chase the bird beyond into the level. Then a giant crystal gate falls onto me, but I was prepared, because to unlock this gate you need 15 Crystal Hearts from previous levels, which I had already collected. Or you could just skip the whole thing, but we're not going to talk about that. But then I was kind of taken aback when I saw an actual tutorial in the game, and I'll just let it speak for itself. It's a funny, cheesy slideshow presentation on wave dashing? I didn't know how to wave dash, but I already knew what it was. But it's a speedrun tech, and it's part of this level? What? Even though I already knew what it was still hard to put in practice. There was a short practice area to get the hang of it, and after several attempts, I was finally out of there. And I went to go catch the bird. Using the new wave dash technique, it was like I was way faster and more skilled than ever before, being able to catch the bird with ease. But wait, the bird doesn't want to be caught. Madeline has kind of a defeated moment, but then thinks that the bird is keeping her from Granny, thus making it into a challenge to catch the bird. This is where the level takes a leap in difficulty, but the music filled me with determination, so I fought on. And at this moment, I don't think I can easily explain the difficulty of this level. It took every ounce of my patience, skill, strength, and sheer will to make it through every room from this point on. No longer was I only excited after each room, but relieved as well, because every room took the breath out of me. Every room was an entirely new idea, with new twists and turns every step of the way. It was like I had to solve a puzzle and dance at the same time. There were moments where I had to put every skill I knew to the test and weave them correctly just to perfectly make it through a portion of this treacherous path. Only calling it hard is an understatement, and again, it is probably the hardest challenge I've ever done in my life. Even so, even though the level was so intense and difficult, I still never got angry, and pushed on, never giving in. I had already put too much effort to give up now. I was willing to see this through to the end. So after several rooms of struggling, there's a point where Madeline comes in and tries to reconcile with Madeline, explaining that they're in space chasing a bird. It's obviously a dream. It's time to wake up. Then Madeline says that She knows it's a dream, but she still wants to see Granny again. And she's going to do it even if the whole universe is against her. And she'll do it with or without anybody's help. Somewhere in this section too is where I had to take a break. At this point, I was more or less halfway through the level. I wanted to beat it, but I had school the next day and it was like 1 a.m. So as hard as it was to do, I turned it off and went to bed. The next day, I went through my classes online and I was thinking about the game the entire time. And as soon as class was done, I immediately opened the game back up again. Final Defiance, the name of the song in this next part, and also the most challenging part for me personally. At the end of each B-side, and to unlock each B-side, there is a room with these timing blocks that change with the music. This section has several rooms of these, with this slow, cold, and dull music. It's very fitting, but it really tested my will. No longer did I have my excitement in this area, as most of the color here was desaturated, and everything felt like a challenge just to be a challenge. Up until this point, I hadn't noticed much of what I had been feeling physically, but in this section, I had noticed my hands starting to cramp. I felt exhausted, and I just wanted to be done with this. But I still didn't want to give up, so I gritted my teeth and kept pushing forward. With each room, I was hoping it would be the end of this timing section. It felt like it would go on forever, as the rooms just kept coming one after another. I had to take several moments to sit and stare at specific rooms, thinking, how the hell do I do this? And just banging my head against a wall to try and make it through to almost no avail. Eventually I did make it through, and at the end of this tiring area, there it was, the bird. Maybe this is the end, I thought. Madeline catches on to the bird, and then they crash. Madeline almost keeps trying, but is stopped by Madeline, telling her that they need to wake up, and this isn't healthy. Madeline kind of agrees, saying she knows it's a dream and Granny is gone forever, and nothing can bring her back. Taking a moment to realize what she needs to do, she figures that the bird is trapped here in her dream, and before she wakes up, she wants to set it free, to set things right. And so Madeline, the bird, and Madeline all start working together to try and escape this dream. At this point too is also where the music picks back up again. And finally, I am back into the grooves of things, ready to take on the challenge some more. Again, at this point is where the level takes another leap in difficulty. But with the music so energizing, and with my sheer determination to want to beat this level, it was like I didn't even notice. I was dying more often than the previous rooms, but I didn't care. I wanted to beat this level so bad that nothing else mattered in that moment. Flying through room after room, taking down each challenge one by one, I felt amazing. With the combination of battling the bird and the wave dash, this area felt like the fastest out of any other. I felt challenged, but I was still pushing through it. And then I finally reached the final room. And of course, the most challenging room of all. I took a step back and looked through the binoculars. And to my shock, I saw what was in store for me. Normally, most rooms take 10 to 30 seconds to beat, but it took a good 20 seconds to look at the entire room through the binoculars. I took a deep breath and started cracking away at it, little by little. This room alone took me a good hour or so to beat, and the room in its entirety is around 2 minutes or so. Even so, I kept trying and trying. I had to take breaks here and there, and at one point even Madeline chimed in to say, "You got this." And with everything backing me up, I pushed through. I got an adrenaline rush each time I was nearing the end of the level. It felt exhilarating. And when I would die near the end of the level, I would be so frustrated. But I still managed to stay in the moment, telling myself, I was almost there. I can do that again, but I just need to make it a little further next time. So again, I tried more and more, and eventually I made it to the very end, getting launched even further up into the sky by Madeline and the bird, launched so far up into what looked like heaven, where I finally got to say farewell to Granny, and thus ending the dream. After looking back on everything, I learned a lot about myself. The biggest thing I learned from this was just how much I am an all or nothing kind of person. So that's why I usually have a hard time starting projects, because I know if I'm doing it, I'm going all in. I'm going to see it to the end. With Farewell specifically, I didn't know what I was getting into. And so I had unintentionally challenged myself to my absolute limit. And so it kind of taught me not to overthink everything that I do. Because as long as I try, I'm sure I'll do it. And maybe I'll fail many times along the way, but eventually I will do it. In the end, Farewell took me 8.5 hours to beat, and over 2,000 deaths. And so, kind of the message I want to send is not necessarily to play Celeste and suffer, but it's just to go out and challenge yourself and keep trying. Do something that you can be proud of. It will not only teach you something about yourself, but it will give you the motivation to keep trying more things and to keep challenging yourself and to generally keep going and never give up.